Thank you very much for inviting me in this important workshop. My topic is understanding the collection of traditional private library archive among Ethiopian Muslims. In this talk, I will briefly review the historical background of book collecting and present what private collecting means today, the state of private library archival collection, its challenges, and the way forward. The history of libraries, archives, and the book collection is as old as the history of written tradition in Christian, Jewish, and Muslim Ethiopia. Manuscripts were kept in synagogue, monasteries, mosques, and private homes. We know very little about the circulation of books, collections, and the collectors in the Middle Ages. I mention here only two examples of book circulation in two medieval law schools of Shafi'i and the Hanafi. The first, the Shafi'i school of Sheikh Hussein of Bale. The second is the Hanafi school of Faqih Hamid al-Gaturi. The Shafi'i school of Sheikh Hussein, in the hagiography of Sheikh Hussein of Bale, it is mentioned that the Sheikh was a scribe and the Mufassir of the Quran. The Shafi'i legal textbook, Tanbih and the Muhadhab of Abi Ishaq, Ibrahim bin Muhammad al-Shirazi, were introduced in this time. That is between 12th and the 13th century. Introduced by his disciple, Musa al-Muqri, a scholar studied in Zabid, Yemen. Musa al-Muqri was taught by the two Yemeni scholars, Ismail al-Hadrami and Ahmed bin Musa bin Ujail, who died, the last one, 1291. Musa, after receiving ijazah, that means permission to teach, returned home with two textbooks of Shafi'i mentioned above. This only trace we know, and maybe in the future we have to dig more to understand what kind of text is circulating. The second is the Hanafi school of Faqih Hamid al-Gaturi. I recently discovered on the marginalia of manuscript kept in one of the private collections a short biography of an Ethiopian scholar named Faqih Hamid al-Gaturi al-Waranti. In the margins, a certain Sheikh Uthman bin Sheikh Ali al-Ifati al-Harari presents a rhymed biographical sketch of Faqih Hamid al-Gaturi as below. He said, in the 80s of 7th century, that 680 according to Hijrah, the Sheikh of Islam and the Mufti of the nation, our Faqih Hamid al-Gaturi al-Waranti al-Hanafi al-Yemeni, passed away. His grave is about 3 miles from Harar. He was a contemporary of Imam al-Nawawi. He lived approximately 80 years. He was born in the early 7th century or a little before. He traveled to all countries, Syria, Yemen, and other countries. One of his students was Al-Nasafi, the Hanafite Sheikh, the author of Al-Kanz. Faqih Hamid has many commentaries on fundamentals of Hanafi texts. He commented on Al-Amali in his work entitled Al-Shihab. He had wrote a commentary on Lamia of Ibn Malik. He commented also a well-known text of Hanafi Al-Quduri. He commented also on Jami al-Saghir, on Al-Jumal, and many other works. This indicates the circulation of Hanafi texts by Ethiopians within Ethiopia. We do not possess the works that Hamid al-Gaturi is said to have written. If Usman's claim is true, this would point to an important issue: the contribution of local scholars to general Islamic scholarship and to the dissemination of the Hanafi legal manuals. The scholars were not merely passive recipients, but dynamic producers of Islamic knowledge. When we look to the continuation of collecting culture, the continuation of the tradition of collecting books can be seen in the last period through 3 private library archives from 19th to 20th century, just as a sample. The first is the private collection of Mufti Daud ibn Abi Bakr, who lived between 1743 to 1819 AD from South Wallo, Dawe area. The second, the private collection of Amir Muhammad bin Ali, who ruled from 1856 to 75 from Harar. The third, the library of Haji Mahmud bin Sheikh Abdul Qadir, who lived from 1872 to 1960 in Anajna, Bale. Mufti Daud, the first one, Mufti Daud spent 15 years in Zabid studying and copying important manuscripts found in different libraries of Zabid. According to oral informants, he copied more than 300 books by his hand, including subjects such as geography, mathematics, and astrology, which were based on the prevailing standard in the wider Muslim world. After returning from Yemen, he established his private collection in Gaddo. According to Muhammad Saeed Abdullah, who studied his biography, 23 books copied by his hand have been preserved in today's collection. The date of completion shows that between 1776 up to 1814. So you can see some of the different dates, how many books was copied just from these 23 samples. The library of the library of Amir Muhammad bin Ali was studied by Drews. In 1976, Drews was given the opportunity to photograph a document that listed books belonging to this last Amir of Harar, who ruled Harar before Egyptian. The document he got listed 99 books, which shows the culture of collecting books by individuals. The third, the library of Haji Mahmud was established around 1910 in the Sheikh Hussein in semi-rural area, far from the capital city. The library has special building with traditional shelving known as taket, which was used to store and preserve books. The library lends books until 1960s. Also, people came and read there. Currently, the collection is lost, but I have traced 63 books, which means 9 manuscripts, 46 printed books, and 8 fragmented texts of the collection from his inheritors, from his heirs. This just to show how people are collecting books and also serving the community to read and write. So let us come now, what is the meaning of private library archive collection in our context? Before moving into further discussion, it will be instructive to clarify the meaning of collecting different contexts, modern and pre-modern. In the West, the history of collecting objects of cultural and aesthetic value tends to be presented as a subset of sociology and the history of taste. The collections we will examine, on the other hand, are not collections that developed within a consumer society, rather they are the holdings of scholars. They are unstructured private collection of manuscripts, printed books, documents. the document include letters, genealogy, amulet, court document, and others. These are found in rural and urban area. The majority of the manuscript collections are locally copied by scholars for educational, medical, spiritual use and kept in their homes, while the majority of the printed books were imported from outside. So this is the collection we want to examine. Well, but the meaning of collecting in Western society, as Belk defines, he said, collecting is the process of actively, selectively, passionately acquiring and processing things removed from ordinary use and perceived as part of a set of non-identical objects or experiences. The meanings of our collection differ from what was said above regarding its purposes. The purpose we indicate above, it is educational, spiritual, and social. The collections are not fully non-functional objects and not obsolete that will be thrown as any modern collectible items and rare objects removed from use. They are sacred books which preserved in a certain way. So when we come to classification, here we classify them according to their location. We can classify urban collection and rural collection. The urban collection are also divided into ancient cities before modern Ethiopia, such as Harar, Shonke, Gondar, and the Dire Hussein collections, and the modern cities collection such as Addis Ababa, Adama, and other areas. The ancient city have a long tradition of collecting books, which can be exemplified by bookshelves known as taket, as we mentioned above, while the modern are influenced with modern way of preserving books in shelves, in modern shelves. It is known that ancient cities exported written manuscripts and early printed books to the countryside before modern Ethiopian cities were founded. The modern urban collections were created by the scholars who came from countryside to serve the urban society or returned after graduating from foreign universities and settled in the cities. Some of urban collections have a tendency to evolve from readable books to cultural objects that are considered identity building for Muslims because there is a tendency of establishing museums and displaying manuscripts within a museum. It is therefore very important to closely examine the private collections in urban and rural areas because the local urban and rural private collection can be considered as alternative private library archives from below, complementing the state archives and the state libraries, which is ordered and organized by inclusion and exclusion. Who are the collectors or the owners of the collections? They are teachers, qadis, imams, muazzins, healers, educated farmers, educated pastoralists, and merchants. Sometimes uneducated heirs of the scholarly family. So we can find the collection among the above-mentioned scholars or non-scholars too. How they acquired? Means of acquiring is by copying and writing, purchasing, it includes manuscript and printed books also, by endowment and donation, by exchanging book with other books, and by inheritance. Though the characteristics of both urban and the rural collection, they are as unstructured, not registered, not ordered. They are found in urban and remote rural areas. They are not accessible to everyone, mainly to the owners and those allowed by the owners. They are kept in traditional shelves, taqit, basketry, wooden and iron books, especially the rural collection. Rural collections are collections are kept much less carefully than urban types. They tend to be disorganized and are kept haphazardly and without much care. Rural collections represent the peasant culture of book collection and archives, conceptually and temporally before the birth of modern museums and archives. Both rural and urban collections depict the curriculum in the school of the collector. Rural collection demonstrate indigenous preserving and book storing mechanisms. Here also we have to mention women play a significant role in caring and safeguarding the collections. So if we look to the condition of the collection today, majority of the collections are endangered because of natural factors, mice, termites, rain in the thatched roof houses of the rural collections, the man-made factors, improper handling, displacement, conflicts which cause fire. We can take last episode which is happened around Kamise, and also material factor, because most of the manuscript, the support material are papers. Papers does not live long. So what challenges scholars face? Lack of access. They are not public. Most of them are far from the centers. Lack of attention by state historic preservation agencies or heritage institutions like museums, archives, and libraries. They are not included in annual registration in the preservation action plans. Another challenge is suspicion of owners from outside users, because due to many factors, lack of awareness among owners also on importance of this precious heritage. So what should be done? Future actions and the way forward. Funding is needed for survey, registration, preservation, digitization, cataloging, studying the collections. Studying not only single manuscript, studying the collection as a total. Study of the biography of the collection is important. The best method is to study the social life of the private library archive in general. Many scholars call, for example, my supervisor, Professor Shamil Japi, calls for looking not only at the evidential historical value of the manuscript, but also to look at the ways in which these manuscripts were brought together as collections and constituted as archives, and to ask what are the histories of these engines for producing history. He adds, we need to take far more seriously the indigenous styles of collection, conservation, and producing of the past. To conclude, the private collections show the intellectual history of the scholars and their contribution to scholarship, the history of book, manuscript culture, and its repositories. They trace also past lives and the philosophy of life, contribute to the understanding of proper documentation and indigenous knowledge in the area. Thank you very much.